so that I could make that. And tell me in the comments how much you think that cost. And I'm talking like materials plus time. I'll go ahead and give you a hint. The materials, about 10 bucks. It's a chromoly plate. It's 50 thousandths or 60 thousandths chromoly plate on the base and on the gusset, and then 1/8 inch thick on the actual tab. So that means you got to guess how much time it took to make that little piece, and I'll just give you the total for what that cost here in a few minutes. All right, y'all. Well, we're kicking this video off a little bit different spot than normal. I actually had to roll into Walmart this morning to grab something for one of my kids before they went to school. And check out what we got in the parking lot right here. A Boostmaster wagon version 1.0. And I mean, even they got the sticker. Look at the sticker. Wagon Mafia. What does that one say? Save the whales. Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny, kind of ironic. Roll into Walmart on my normal day here, and we got a Boostmaster wagon in the parking lot. That one probably didn't have boost though, but just kind of tied the day back to Steve Morris, because we've got some work on Val's Camaro to do today. You know, Steve's wife's car, because it's not going to be too much longer before we are trying to haul this thing down to Bradenton to show a lot of you guys the car at the 2.4 hours of LeMullets. Now, it may not be running by then because we've got a lot of thrashing to do. We're still waiting on some parts to come in. Like, we don't have a radiator yet. We've got a lot of things that we don't have. But hopefully we can get this thing put together enough to get it to Bradenton, maybe fire it up just without the radiator in it for just a little bit here and there. But whew, we got a lot to do. Let's get to the shop and show you what's going on. All right, well, we have made it to the shop, or I've made it to the shop, and we're down here on a Saturday, and Will and I are gonna hang some wires. We've got lots of wires and lots of things to wire up, which definitely not gonna get it all done today, but we've started routing some wires through the car. Will was doing this the last time he was in. Got all of our shock sensor wires. We've got our wires for our rear control panel, fuel pump wires, fuel level, fuel sensor, parachute pressure sensors, etc., etc. Other thing Will got done when he was here a couple days ago was the transmission harness. So we've got everything done up on it. And this is the trans brake solenoid and the internal dump solenoid, and then we've got line pressure. Then we've got gear position indicator with a little low dollar motorsports shock sensor, kind of snazzy. And then our dump valve is going to do something like that. Going to mount somewhere right there. I have to modify something down here just a little bit to make this actually work and have a coupler on the bottom instead of having like hose ends and whatnot, just so that coupler kind of acts like one of the mounting spots. I kind of like that idea. And you can see we brought everything over. Then this is our converter charge pressure sensor. I do still need to make the line that tees off from here and goes to this hose end right there, which this was just my mock-up fitting. Everything is going to be crimp fittings here, and just once we actually plumb the car, and then you can see it comes down, goes to a single Deutsch connector. So you unplug this and pull the entire transmission out of the car. There's a transmission temperature sensor down there on the pan. And yeah, it's turning out pretty sweet. So it takes a lot of time to do stuff like that. Like, you wouldn't think that there's 6 hours in that, but there's 6 hours in just setting up those sensors, plotting out all the wiring, documenting everything you're doing so that we can hand Steve paperwork when the car's over and done with and say, well, pin 2 on the Deutsch connector down by the transmission for the transmission is the transmission fluid temperature. Stuff like that. And then getting all of the layouts right for the, the heat shrink so that we've got nice bundles and all that other stuff and nice routing with the heat shrink. But, that's just part of building one of these things. It takes a lot of hours to build one. I mean, literally there's hundreds of hours into a car like this. Hundreds. And actually, that's kind of the theme of the shop. Like, that car's got hundreds of hours in it. That car's going to have hundreds of hours into it. That car's going to have hundreds of hours into it. All because they are huge, huge projects. But we're running out of time, and I'm not getting anything done right now because I'm talking to you guys. So here comes the time lapse, and me and Will are going to get to work. Well, we made some progress on some things today. And it's time for me to get out of here because my youngest has a gymnastics competition, thankfully, right here in Gainesville this weekend. So I'll probably come back tomorrow and work some more, like maybe tomorrow afternoon. we shall see. But yeah, we're making some progress on this thing. And yes, I rewired the boost control solenoids with Deutsch connectors on it, because you're far more likely to find somebody with a Deutsch connector at the racetrack if you need to swap solenoids than you are to find somebody with the little, I forget what those connectors are called that come on the solenoids. And these wires needed to be shortened anyway, so that's just what we're going to do there. And I rewired the driver for the trans brake. That's what this is, and it gets power from the leash board right here. All of this will be tidied up real nice and neat before it goes, or before it gets finalized, I guess you could say. And you saw where I did get the switch panel kind of mounted up in there, and this will get the LED roof light wiring, and then it's going to get run in a piece of heat shrink the whole way through the car over to the board where, you know, it's going to hook up over to there. So just kind of chipping stuff off the list, checking stuff off the list. Yeah, there's a big list. And eventually, if we check all the things off on the list, we'll be done. At least that's the idea. Eventually, we'll have to work out where all of the coil wires go through and how we do those and how we make them disconnectable at the valve cover. And I might do another one of those style Deutsch connector firewall things. Like if I did one, you know, like say I did one here or something, which would be above the header, I think, or maybe even I do it here. So it's under the charge pipe, because if you are taking the heads off or taking the valve covers off, actually, no, you might not have to take the charge pipe off. I think we've done it in a way far enough away from everything that we might not have to take the charge pipes off to take the valve covers off to check lash and stuff like that. So you have to kind of piece all this stuff together as you go along and make sure it works with this and works with that. And that's one of the reasons why we are having to move. I think we're going to have to move our EGT connector, because, you know, the header is right through here now. And the same with our injector harness, where we originally had them here. We had the, you know, the 2 injector harness holes there. Well, now we have 3. So we're going to move them out here because the charge pipe was just too close right here. You can still get to this fine, but the charge pipe is literally, you know, a 1/4 inch off the firewall here. And, you know, that's kind of a problem. So we moved that, or we're going to move that. And that's another one of the things on the list that needs to be checked off. Will, what'd you get done back here today? Nothing. Nothing?
Yeah, just trying to...
I see some board termination stuff.
Yeah, I got this. Of course, we'll have to heat shrink everything once we get it all cut out the length. But
oh yeah, starting on the controls for the rear leash board.
Yeah, so we just kind of got that, and then got this all.
Oh, the taillight wiring too.
So that's all pinned out. So what we'll do is we'll unhook it and put it in the Deutsch connector once we get and get everything kind of finalized, and we'll heat shrink it and all that stuff. But just so right now, we're just gonna kind of working on terminating everything and moving forward. And as we move forward, we'll shrink it all up.
Cool.
Make it a little bit.
Yep. You kind of got to build it, and then take it out and heat shrink it, and then put it back in the car. And there's some different methods of doing this. This is kind of the way we've always done cars. Some guys take a big piece of plywood and do all their mapping and their measuring. And I attempted that on the floor with a project years ago, and I ended up having to modify some of the connectors because they were a couple inches too long. You ended up with a weird extra loop. So if we build it on the car, it should fit. At least that's my theory.
Yeah, that's the ideal plan. So hopefully we'll come up kind of like this, and then of course you got, you know, like this connector.
Yeah, we got our
come up this way.
Parachute solenoid back there, our parachute handle release solenoid here. Yes. So that air line goes up with the parachute cables up to the handle. It's going to be in the roof. It's not in there now. Actually, I guess that could be bolted in. Like, we're to the point of assembling this thing so I can put the parachute handle in and maybe start routing the parachute cables. And we got a lot to do. See you tomorrow in about half a second. All right, well, back next day. I skipped Sunday, but it's actually after hours Monday. Eddie and I are working late on Val's Camaro. We had several of us working on it today. Eddie is working on the front travel limiter and it's a combination travel limiter and shock sensor mount. We'll show you more of that later as we get closer to it. Not in this video, but that's what our travel limiters look like right there. And we have them set up to where they are functional and don't run out of room even when that is all the way down, because that's one of the things you've got to think of. You never want it to completely compress the shock limiter or the shock sensor, because anytime it goes completely full solid, it's going to find the next weakest link, which might be a control arm or a bolt or wreck the sensor or something. So Will got a bunch more wiring done back here today. We've got all sorts of wires going everywhere. Going to be measuring the pressure in the air tank, so we have that in the data. And I actually have a parachute pressure sensor that's actually, it's going to split. So 5 volt and ground goes to 2 sensors, and then we'll have 2 different signal returns with those 2 colored wires. And the reason we're doing all that is because I'm going to have it where they're going to have the option to do this, but if there is no air pressure in the parachute pack, because that is a mechanical switch that's on the back of the car that puts air pressure into the parachutes, if there's no air pressure there to load the parachute packs, the car won't make boost, or at least it won't make any more boost than wastegate, which means that it won't go super fast. At least that's the idea anyways. I mean, it won't go so fast that the brakes won't stop the car, because this thing at full boogie should go 220 plus miles an hour, and that's fast. So we want to make sure we build some optional safeties into the car that can be tuned and whatnot, and I'll show you. Ooh, quick look at that. We'll do more of a video on that sometime later this week, but I have a couple hours today in the office in here just programming, basically staring at my Holly stuff and organizing the pin map for all of the different inputs, which you can see I have 1, 2 5 volt ground or 12 volt inputs, or 1 thermistor, which is like a temperature deal, or which, you know what, I need to make sure that my fuel level, see, I got to change that to a 5 volt. Okay, sweet. It's because I'm actually going to be using some 0 to 5 volt fuel level sensors that are from some of my airplane buddies have used them. So anyways, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speed or frequency sensor inputs left. And on the output side, we literally have 1 input or 1 output right there. These are all linked here, so they link together for some other outputs. And I think I've got everything. So this is the real killer right here, because this is the injector driver, like signals for the race set 1 and race set 2, or really that's injector set 2 and injector set 3 in the Holly. So lots of thinking, lots of planning ahead so that we make sure we have room for stuff. And Steve's boost gates kind of threw me for a loop, where I had to go back and redo a bunch of the programming to make sure that I could fit the outputs needed for the TurboSmart black box, make sure I could fit that into the system. Anyways, it's been a busy day. Busy day. But, oh, and Eddie got this done. So like I mentioned earlier in the video, this is the front drive shaft can, which will most likely be destroyed if it ever pitches the front drive shaft out of it, or the front U-joint. But we hope we are overbuilding the drive shaft. Like we're doing a carbon drive shaft with 1480 joints. All that stuff is, you know, what you need for these really powerful cars. Really powerful, moderately heavy. I mean, even though we're trying to make this thing a good bit lighter than the wagon, you know, Steve was thinking 800. I'm hoping 500. Like I'm hoping for somewhere around 3,000, 3,100 pounds for this thing. So if we can achieve that just with the same power that Steve car makes, it's gonna go faster. And Val's gonna be putting the gap on Steve. Yep. Don't want to be at that Thanksgiving dinner after that happens. Actually, Val was faster than Steve for a long time. I remember him saying that. So if you're watching, Steve, she's about to do it again. Anyways, so that's our front drive shaft can. And if you remember, this is because originally there was supposed to be an overdrive unit that occupied this space and then put the U-joint inside the rear can. But we did this, one, because we already had that one made. And I guess we could have remade it, but it would have taken the same amount of time as making this one. So by making the second can, now the car does have the option to go back with an overdrive later down the road if Steve ever builds something that has an overdrive. Anyways, got another small batch of stuff for powder coat, some seat brackets, transmission cross member. This is the passenger seat bracket stuff, so all of that can be removed when we're going for super ultra lightweight mode, as well as we're building all of the street fuel system, fuel tank. The only part of all of that will be able to drop out in like 5 minutes. That's the plan anyways. So you'll be able to unplug all the electrical components, and there'll be 2 bolts on the front, and then there's kind of a saddle mount on the back of the tank, just like we did in Soccer Mom. And then that'll probably, you know, if the tank is full, it's going to be over 100 pounds that could get dumped out of the car. Or it may be needed for ballast if the car is racing on tracks that aren't so great. Now granted, I'm not a huge fan of carrying around 15 gallons of gasoline just for the ballast. But if there's somewhere racing, you know, the car will have the option to be able to be run on methanol with just it'll idle on one set of the injectors. So if we do that, then they could just fill up the back tank with water, like take the fuel pump out of it, still use the same filler neck and everything, and it'll have a drain on the bottom of the tank. Just fill up the tank full of water and use water for ballast, because water's okay for ballast. Sloshes a little bit, so maybe that's not ideal, but at least it would be good ballast at the very back of the car if it's needed. We hope it's not, but depending on the tracks that they're going to race on, you never know. So a lot of rambling, which kind of shows you where my brain goes with some of these things, and making sure that we try to cover as many bases as we possibly can, so that we end up with a good running, successful, multi-function race car. But I'm gonna set up a time lapse, eat an Uncrustable, and get back to work.
Where's my Uncrustable?
Last one.
Wow.
Sorry about your luck.
Patch these?
Heck no.
Dang. Wow. Y'all see what I'm dealing with?
I took you out to dinner last time you stayed late, so.
So dinner again tonight?
I'm not saying no. All right, we gotta get back to work. Well, let's get this time lapse over and done and out of the way. And it's gonna be a pretty decently long time lapse, because Eddie and I just got in and went to town on this thing, getting a bunch of little stuff done that needed to get done so that we could get a bunch of parts out to powder coat. And when it comes to, like, especially Eddie and I, when we get in here after hours and, you know, people aren't coming through the door and the phone's not ringing and, you know, we're not helping the other guys on their projects, because Eddie and I both kind of help out with what the other guys are doing. We are the most experienced or the most knowledgeable guys out in the shop. So when you put us both on the same project, we can really get some stuff done. And it's going to take that to get this car done in the time frame that we need to get it done, and to the level that we want to get it done, because I would really like to see the car be able to crank up at the 2.4 hours of LeMullets this Friday. Now that means we still have to mount, well, we need to paint the firewall, which we're nearing the point of where we can disassemble everything and go ahead and paint the firewall. I'm pretty sure I've got a couple of things to check off the list, and we should be able to get that all painted up before we stick the engine down in it on Wednesday-ish. But we also have to plumb the oiling system, which we don't even have the dry sump tank mounted. So, as you may understand, that's got to come after we get the engine mounted in the car, and preferably after we get the radiator. So the radiator may be the actual holdup, and maybe what we can do is to use some threaded inserts into the chassis that we can build off of rather than weld stuff to, so that when we it'll let us build the mounts for the pieces we're going to add on, rather than, you know, weld them to like the frame and then need to repaint that area. So that may be an option that we'll consider. I'll check in with Steve and see when he's expecting the radiator to be you know, delivered to the shop. So once we get confirmation of that, I'll make some further plans and see if we can, you know, maybe make some mounts for the radiator. Like, I have a mock-up radiator and it gives me a kind of an idea, but it's not really enough to really go ahead and get perfect mounts made for the radiator. So a few things to think over there. And Eddie is working on the control arms, or was, and I am now working on a brace or a bracket that's going to move the throttle attachment for the second throttle body. And it's probably hard to see from this angle, but it needed to be made so that the throttle attachment didn't go over center. Like, the holes that were already in the throttle arm on the throttle body, one side works okay, but the other side does not, because when you attach them in opposing directions, it just didn't work out. But like I was talking about Eddie a minute ago, he got the travel limiter tabs fully welded onto the lower control arms, disassembled them, and logged or documented the number of turns for each rod end that screwed into those front control arms, because we had kind of mocked up all of that stuff and kind of ran the front suspension through its travel. So we had the camber set, we had the caster set. So if we get the pieces back from powder coat, screw the rod ends back in the same number, we should be very close to our final alignment specs, which will save us some time when we're getting the car set up to go to the racetrack. So you can see I'm back working on the throttle body. I actually reinstalled the turbos to install the cold side pipes so that I could work on how all of this throttle stuff is going to attach. Now with the intake manifold facing the firewall and the throttle bodies being back by the firewall, it should really clean up the engine bay and make it more simple to work on. Like, I kind of think we will be able to take a cylinder head off with the charge pipe still installed, because you guys know that you can leave the intake manifold on an SMX when you take the cylinder head off. So potentially we might be able to get the valve cover off. I know we'll be able to get the valve cover off with the charge pipe still on, and then we might be able to get the complete cylinder head off too, which that may require taking the head studs out. We'll know more about that when we get the engine set in again, because that's not really something I looked at all that much, I'll be honest, when we had the engine sitting in the car, because we were too busy building the headers and mounting the turbos and all of that fun stuff that we were doing while we had the engine. Yeah. Well, maybe that explains why that was such a long time lapse, because a lot of time passed by. And we got a lot done. You can see Eddie's got all of the front suspension back off, which you probably saw in time lapse. I remounted the turbos so that I could play with and engineer all of this so that I could make that. And tell me in the comments how much you think that cost. And I'm talking like materials plus time. I'll go ahead and give you a hint. The materials, about 10 bucks. It's a chromoly plate. It's 50 thousandths or 60 thousandths chromoly plate on the base and on the gusset, and then 1/8 inch thick on the actual tab. So that means you got to guess how much time it took to make that little piece, and I'll just give you the total for what that cost here in a few minutes. So you might have also seen me in the time lapse making this bracket, because I needed to make the attachment point the same distance from the center of the throttle shaft rotation. So that's what we've done there. And we also made it to where it doesn't run the risk of going over center. So, and they both get wide open throttle. So once I get, actually I can go ahead and weld the tabs to that. So where the throttle cable comes through, and there will be this rod end on the end of the cable. All nice and solid. The bracket goes on, oh, look at what I did. That's a handy holder, parts holder right there. So this, nope, wrong way. That goes on there. I still have to drill my mounting holes there, but that will be easier done, or easier to do. All right, this is gonna take 2 hands. Hold, please. So it'll be a heck of a lot easier to drill and center punch those holes. Like, I may do the 2 outside ones here, and then I'll have the holes, probably gonna do nice nut certs in those, so you don't have to have someone on the inside of the firewall as well. Maybe I'll do nut certs, maybe I'll do just nylocks on the bottom of the, like on the underside of the firewall. But you can see Well, there might have been a little time in that because it's a perfect fit right there in the angle of this firewall piece right there. Got just a little bit of play in the hole there because this part is bigger than this part. So probably what I'll do is once this is bolted down, smear a little silicone or RTV around that just to lock it in and seal up any major holes in the firewall, which other than holes for things, and looking at those, we may be able to make those work still. We're gonna see once we get the engine back. But that piece goes on there. And then there will be 2 of these tabs that get welded to the center of the bar. And I need to drill these out to 1/4 inch because that's the size of the hole that's in that rod end. Heim joint, whatever you want to call it. And then this will be in double shear, meaning that it's not just, you know, one bolt trying to, if I just did one tab, you know, every time you operated the throttle, it would be trying to twist this off. So we'll do 2 tabs, which I've already got my other one out right there. And then once I do that, which actually I could probably go ahead and do that before I leave tonight, but I'm not gonna because I'm tired. And it's been a long day. I was here at 7:30 this morning. Actually did an interview with the Freedom Plus guys, which you will see hopefully during the 2.4 hours of LeMullets this weekend, and I think it'll probably be on their website. So that was kind of cool. Got the burnout car out, and it's about burnout rivals and all that fun stuff. So anyways, if all goes well, we are going to even drop the subframe off, the front subframe, and take it to powder coat as well. The only thing we have left to do to it is add a couple of tabs for the belly pan. And I think that's it. Yeah. I still haven't decided if I'm going to do Zeus-on belly pan or actually a bolt-on, like use tabs that have a nut welded to the back side of them, and then you actually have like a 1/4 inch bolt that you just zip off with a gun, and you can use kind of sturdier tabs, and it's just sturdier, I guess. That's how we've done Soccer Mom and a couple other cars, and it's pretty nice. Belly pans are 1000% the way to go. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, like an actual pan under the engine. The diapers, engine diapers, are not fun. When are diapers fun at all? As a parent, thankfully I'm out of that stage, so I don't have to worry about that anymore, hopefully. Anywho, here's our batch powder coat stuff that we showed earlier. Got our engine mount brackets that tie all of the front together. The front lower control arms with the welded, the welded tabs on them for the suspension limiters. So pretty good batch of stuff to head down to powder coat. And hopefully we get it back in a day or two, because we will have an engine in 2 to 3 days. And then we have the 2.4 hours of LeMullets to go to this weekend. Woo, man, I've got a busy bit of time here. And I don't know if I ever showed the completed header, but it's kind of wild. Eddie did a super awesome job welding it. Pulls up nice and square on the cylinder head. I may, like when you take all the bolts loose, it's got a 1/16 inch of a gap in a couple of spots. And there's not going to be any gaskets. There's just going to be a little bit of RTV around each port. And you bolt the header on. But hopefully we can get it all bolted on and it won't leak. And I did have somebody tell me that I should have just flipped this flange upside down instead of doing all that machining work in the last Steve Morris video. But if you, so let's look, we're straight between this bolt and like just straight over. So if I were to do that from this bolt straight over, that spark plug's in the way. Then I wouldn't be able to get a spark plug wire on it at all. I mean, come on now. Think I would miss something that simple? Yes, I flipped them upside down to see if it would clear before we built the headers. And I just had to notch them with the mill. And so now you can see we've got a nice shot down at the plug wire, or the spark plug. So, that's that. And I think that's going to wrap up this video, which is probably super long, but we've got a lot done. And there's going to be a lot more videos in the next couple of days because we have a goal to get this thing rolling into the 2.4 hours of LeMullets. Ideally, we'd be able to crank it, but right now I have no fuel system, or an engine, or a torque converter, or a drive shaft, or yeah, that's about it. Don't have an oil pump. Well, I have an oil pump, but I don't have an engine. So, anyways, appreciate everybody watching, subscribing. Oh, the part. Very last part of the video. How long and how much did that part cost? Well, I had an hour and a half in making that. Kind of sciencing it out, getting it, that bottom plate made and cut on the bandsaw, and then bent, welded, gusseted. You know, a couple of test fits along the way to make sure I got the angles. Because if you look, the tab is not square to the bottom plate. So yeah, hour and a half, $150 an hour. So $225 for the labor side of the bracket, $10 in material. Still got to have it powder coated. Probably in the batch, that'll be $5 to powder coat it, $10. And then sales tax. So you might as well call that little piece $250. Now, $250 for that little bitty piece. And then we have built this complete car. These things get real expensive real quick. Either real expensive, or they're going to take you a ton of hours to do this yourself, because it takes us a ton of hours to do little stuff like that. But it's got to be done. Steve wanted a Morse cable like that for the throttle cable. And actually what I've done is I've used the shifter cable from Motion Raceworks. So shifter cable and the throttle cable will be the same cable. So they only have to have one spare in the trailer, and that will work for the shifter and throttle cable, which I actually have to order one because I stole the shifter one for the throttle, so I need to order another one for the shifter, and I'll probably order two, so Steve will have a spare in the trailer, because if you have a spare, you won't need it. That's my theory. Anyways, it's time for me to go home and go to bed. Maybe I'll edit this video in the morning. Anyways, maybe not. I need to, because you guys like watching this video, or this series. So, and you probably noticed I didn't do a video on the Cutlass on Sunday, but I was tired, and I was working on this. So, appreciate everybody watching, subscribing, following along. See you guys in the next one. Bye.